Greetings, welcome. I am, for anyone who doesn't know me, Elizabeth Sams. I'm president of Beach's Activist Movement, and I'm looking for Karen, say something so you get up here.
All right, I'm Karen Droege. I'm with Indivisible Mandarin.
And we're delighted to be doing this meeting together. We've been working together since, I guess, 2018. Our groups are extremely compatible, and particularly this week with all kinds of bad news breaking, it's a pleasure to gather as a larger group together. Can you switch to the next slide, Carol, with the what to do? We are recording. If you're joining us late, everyone remember that we want you muted, because since we are recording, the audio quality is a whole lot better. A lot of people submitted questions in advance, but if you have questions as we go along, you're welcome to also put them in the chat box. We have a pretty dense program tonight, so we will get to the pre-submitted questions as quickly as we can. Then we're going to break away because we're also getting an update from Tracy Polson about what's going on with her campaign. And then to the extent we can, we'll bounce back to some of the questions from the chat box. And so in the spirit of moving things along, we're incredibly lucky to have these three women speaking to us tonight. If you've been depressed about politics, these are three people who should make you feel very much better. I'm going to introduce them all now so we can kind of go seamlessly across. Most of you probably know them all. Lenelle Philman is currently president of League of Women Voters of Jacksonville First Coast here. I've known her as a volunteer at practically every event, every rally, every anything I've shown up at since I got to Florida. She's remarkable. And the League is obviously one of the leading organizations focusing on both redistricting and voter rights. And so she's got a lot to talk to us about. Judy Shecklin is currently legislative chair of Jacksonville now, has been president there for years on and off. Is a lesson to me every time I'm getting burned out about my limited number of years doing active work here in Florida, because she's been hacking away at Florida politics for several decades now and continues to be hopeful. And Dr. Nancy Stotts is the chair of Doctors Fighting COVID, the group that organized, 2 years ago now, to try to help our local government here in Duval and across Florida have a saner approach to COVID. And she'll be updating us on some healthcare bills. So that's our broad roster. And just as a reminder, once we're done with them and Q&As to them, we will switch off to Tracy Polson. And then there's some exciting stuff at the very end, because we also have a brief update on what's going on with the redistricting hearings here in Duval and what's going to happen at the next joint meeting. So stay with us if you can. Lenelle, I'm turning it over to you. Are you still muted? If you're talking, where?
How about that? Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I apologize. I forgot to unmute my screen. Thank you so much for having me here this evening. This is a heavy hitters list when I look at the other two speakers. So I'm just honored that you would even have me here. Before I start, I do want to remind everybody that the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization, but we are political. So we neither endorse nor oppose political candidates or parties, but we do take positions on issues and on amendments. Just a quick rear view mirror. I know we're all feeling a little inundated about what's going on in 2022, but just a reminder, this is the number of bills that were introduced in the legislative session in 2021. 3,140, and of those, about 8.8 of those bills that were filed actually passed, and 265 of those were actually signed into law. Sadly, SB 90 was one of those, as well as the anti-transgender bill for our kids playing sports. So this is the windshield now, 2022, what we're looking at. Session started January 11th, and already it's been a bit overwhelming, I think. But about 3,000 bills have been introduced. 1,100 of those are for apportionment. And I would encourage everyone to take time to go back and look at who is asking for money from our representatives, and if there are any benchmarks or standards for what becomes of that money once they actually give it away, because it's our money, and we should know what it's being used for. So of the roughly 1,500 bills filed, we imagine that about 1/5 of those will actually be submitted to the governor for either approval or for veto. So these are the 12 legislative priorities for the League of Women Voters for the state of Florida. The top 5 are lobbying firm, a paid lobbying firm helps us work on, and the rest we work on obviously throughout the state as members. I'm just going to touch briefly on 3 of these tonight: voting and election, redistricting and apportionment, and then home rule and preemption. I do want to give a quick update on SB 90. I just got off a call with our president, Cecile Schoon. Most of you know she's a civil rights attorney out of Bay County and has done a lot of work in our capital on behalf of the league. But she's actually being prepped for testimony this week. So as much as she's in the Capitol working on other things, she's also working on this. But they did throw out some of the legislation that we originally filed, but we are still working to have those drop boxes made available, not just during early voting hours and not just at SOE sites. We're still working to get rid of that disclaimer that makes people believe that we're going to register you to vote, but then we may not be able to get your voter registration application to the SOE. Very diminishing, especially for the League of Women Voters to have to say that to a registrant. But also addressing the fact that we now will have to annually renew our vote by mail request. So we're still working on the most inhumane is the ability to be able to give snacks or water to people who are waiting in line to vote. And everybody knows here, even in November, it can be a little hot. So it just seems inhumane that we would not be able to do that. A couple of things on voting and election. SJR 244. I've got the bills at the top and who introduced those. Not a big fan of this. The partisan elections for members of school boards. Actually, back in 1998, there was a ballot initiative for this. And the voters in the state of Florida said that we were not in favor of having our school board members actually run in partisan elections. But somebody thought that was important, so they've introduced that bill. So there it is. Also, SB 368. This changes the closing of books from 14 to 29, or excuse me, from 29 to 14 days. I think everybody knows the league is actually in favor of same-day voter registration. So anything that allows us to continue to register voters closer to election day, we're big fans of. This SB 524 that Senator Hudson has introduced, you'll see here, if anyone's familiar with the requirements now, that if you are a third-party voter registration organization and you neglect to turn forms in, or you create some other faux pas, that there are fines attached to that. Well, this actually removes the $1,000 cap per year. It was that you would pay $50 or $100 or $500, but you were capped out at $1,000. This actually removes the $1,000 cap per calendar year. So I guess we can continue to collect money. But one of the things of note about this is it prohibits ranked choice voting in the state of Florida. I'm not sure if you know that Sarasota actually adopted ranked choice voting, although I don't think they've actually implemented it. But this actually takes away a local municipality's ability to decide how they do their elections. So we're not a big fan of that. This is a big bill. Actually, it's going to cover 2 slides, and I'll only hit a couple of things. This is an HB 1353, and then its companion bill SB 1914 that have been introduced. And as you read through some of these, you're going to find that some of it sounds like the Freedom to Vote Act that was introduced on a national level, and then we did not actually see it get a vote in our nation's capital yesterday. But so this, it allows the DMV voter application to be provided anytime somebody gets a state ID or a driver's license. It also allows, it creates a situation where you have to decline voter registration when you're dealing with the DMV, as opposed to you have to opt in, you would have to opt out. It also allows electronic voter registration application to be sent to the Secretary of State's office within 24 hours, as opposed to a slower process. I think that gets us closer and closer to same-day voter registration in the future. Again, it removes this statement that we have to say that although we're signing you up to register to vote, we may not be able to get your form to the SOE in time. It removes a $1,000 cap also for voter registration violations. Let me get to the next one. It requires the governor to order a special election within 180 days of a vacancy of an office. This actually came about because we had 3 predominantly Democratic leaning seats, I believe, that the governor failed to order a special election for. There were others that were less Democratic that he made sure there was an election for, but not those. So it helps him remember to do his job. This also changed the ballot design for the president, the vice president, the governor, senators. Those will be randomly placed on a ballot versus the party who received the highest votes in the last election. If anybody knows the record of what's going on here in Florida, you know what that's about. It also requires that our supervisor of election actually show an operational plan for maximum voter turnout. So we're ready to accommodate every voter in the state of Florida should they turn out. And I think this is actually born out of the fact that we had 77% of voters turn out in the last presidential election. And I think that kind of shocked some people. It also allows people to designate a person to be able to pick up their ballots. And oddly enough, it prevents a polling place from being put in a gated community unless all the residents in the precincts actually live in the gated community. And then again, it allows for food and water to be given outside the solicitation zone of 150 feet. So these 2 bills, I'll have to go back to my notes on a couple of these. I just want to make sure I don't mess this up. These are companion bills. This again removes the statement that you have to make about not being able to file a voter registration application on behalf of an applicant if you're assisting them. It also it removes the requirement for the social security number and the driver's license when you're doing your vote by mail request, and it returns the secure vote by mail drop boxes outside of early voting hours. The SB 1228 and HB 903. We're big fans of this. It provides voter registration in schools just for those students who are in U.S. government classes, allows them to register or pre-register. I think everybody knows now that you can pre-register if you're age 16 or 17 here in the state of Florida. It also requires our supervisors of elections to provide these FAQs and the actual materials that they need to do electronic voter registration in schools. SB 1352 and HB 921 limits foreign contributions to any election held in our state. And again, a lot of these are born out of what has happened here, not just in the state of Florida, but other states over the last 7 to 8 years. SB 1412 and HB 1127, it limits citizens' initiatives to subject sense of procedures on the Florida Constitution. This has to do with the number of things that citizens are trying to address. A lot of times those citizens' initiatives are born out of the fact that legislators don't act on behalf of the concerns of the Florida voter. And so we take these initiatives up ourselves. SB 1586 and HB 1217. This is just separately from the other bill that Ms. Thompson filed, just requiring the governor to order a special election within 14 days of a seat vacancy, and then to make sure the special election is held within 180 days after that vacancy occurs. SB 694 and HB 1353. I think we're all big fans of this. The SOE has to pay the vote by mail return or postage on the return envelopes. Makes it easy for anybody and everybody to be able to vote by mail. And there's the Senate Joint Resolution in HB 177 here. Not a fan of this. Once again, this is an opportunity for the legislature to actually not have to hear from the Florida voter. It requires a 66.67% vote to pass an amendment on the ballot to revise the Constitution, as opposed to we're currently at 60%. Very briefly, redistricting and apportionment. So looking at the number of people and seeing some of these names, I have a feeling that this is very, very basic, too basic, I think, for some of our attendees, but I will go over it. So every 10 years, we participate in a census. And then from the actually draw new maps. So Florida's population grew by 2.9 million residents, giving the state one more additional representative. So the Florida legislature draws the U.S. congressional maps to reflect its number of representatives, and then it also draws the state and the House, State, Senate maps. So thank goodness we do have fair districts here in the state of Florida, and that prevents them from drawing maps that favor or disfavor an incumbent or a political party. It also the maps can't be drawn to deny racial or language minorities the equal opportunity to participate in a political process or elect their representatives of choice. Districts must be contiguous, and unless otherwise required, districts must be compact as equal in population as feasible. Where feasible, must make use of existing city, county, and geographical boundaries. So I'm normally not jumping a county line, not jumping main thoroughways. So it must be contiguous, must be compact, must have equal population, and it must meet the fair districts criteria. So gerrymandering, just really gerrymandering, what it is an abuse of power. It creates an unfair advantage for one political party over another. It allows extreme minority positions to achieve power, and it undermines voter ability to hold elected officials accountable using the ballot. And again, it weakens faith in government and in democracy. So we're already at an all-time low right now, unfortunately, with folks having faith in our election process, and also really questioning, does your vote even matter? So the league is fighting very hard in the Capitol here in the state of Florida to make sure that our representatives are abiding by the law. Earlier today, speaking to our president, Cecile Schoon, she did make mention of the fact that one of the things that they've not done here in the state of Florida is they've not done an analysis of people by minority and by language. So you really have to do an analysis of how people are impacted positively or negatively, and our state legislators have not done that yet. They're drawing lines based on some information from 2016, which is actually born from the census of 2010. So I work hard to get that addressed. So who actually runs the map? We do. Governor and the Supreme Court, and apparently the governor draws his own maps now. So congressional districts in Florida are actually drawn by the Florida legislature, and the governor can veto that plan, which is interesting because he introduced his own plan. And then the state legislative districts are drawn by the legislature, I'm having a hard time with that word tonight, as a joint resolution. Now the governor can't veto these plans, but our Supreme Court does. So just a note here at the bottom, we do anticipate these maps being passed in the 2022 legislative session. And this is important to us because there are filing deadlines in April 2022 for federal offices, and then in June 2022 for our statewide races. So it's important that you know what your district is in order to file. I'm going to try to do something here, and I'm going to hope this works. I'll try it once, and if it doesn't, I'll just give up on it. But the league is encouraging folks to actually go to the state's website and look at these maps, so you can see what is actually going on. So this is actually on the state's redistricting map, and I've got Congressional District 5 here, just so you can see it, because that's been of interest today. And I don't know if I'll be able to move everybody off my screen there. Okay. So if we would like to see, this is the current map that you have on your screen there, hopefully. And this is the Governor Desantis map. But what happens here is this allows you to pull up the maps as they exist now. It also allows you to look at the population from the previous census and the current one. And then it allows you to look at the maps that are being suggested that you'll actually find on the Florida state website for redistricting. So you can look at the population, you look at the individuals who make up that particular district. And you can do the same thing for the Senate, for the House seats, as well as for the Senate. You can pull them up all over the state. So we would encourage you to do that, so you can see what actually concerns you. Some people are looking at maps all over the state. I know up here we tend to look at our different House districts and our Senate and our congressional seats that impact us. But we would encourage you to actually take a moment and go to the state site and review those. All right, I'm going to try to get that off my screen. I hope that wasn't too dizzying for me to pop that up. All right, so one of the things we would encourage you to do is attend the public meetings, which really are actually happening in the Capitol. We've not seen where they're going to do any kind of traveling roadshow, but if you're able to make it to Tallahassee and attend public hearings and make public comment, we would encourage you to do that. If you're not able to do that, we would encourage you to go to the Florida Redistricting website and make your comments there. It's important that we all be on the record, especially if this goes to court. We would encourage you to email your legislators, but also write letters to the editor. Make your voice heard. Encourage other people to do the same thing. So I can put these in the chat when I'm done with my presentation, if anyone would like that. But knowledge is power, and I think they're counting on the fact that we don't know how to look at the maps. We don't know how to look at the data. We would do that at the league. Just briefly, I'm going to talk real quick. Home rule actually provides authority to adapt ordinances or enact programs without permission from the state, provided such ordinance don't conflict with the state or with the federal law. So I'll talk a little bit about home rule and preemption here. So there's a Senate Joint Resolution 152 introduced by Mr. Farmer, and it does require a supermajority vote of each house to approve a general law preempting the subject of legislation to the state. Some may see that as good and some may see that as bad, depending on how you see things passing in the Florida House. This is the one I think that is of most interest to everybody, is this local ordinances. This SB 280 that was introduced by Mr. Hudson, and then 403, if I'm saying his name right, is Gio Lombardo. So this allows for businesses to actually combat local ordinances that a municipality may introduce. And a lot of people think, how do I say this? So like we passed an HRO here in Jacksonville. I'll use it like that because I know the LGBTQ community is looking at this ordinance, and it's very disconcerting to them. Let's say we pass an HRO and there's a business that wants to prevent it from actually being instituted. They're saying that you have to do an impact statement on how those businesses would be impacted by this new ordinance. There are a number of other things, but this just really is like against home rule. That this is trying to say that people cannot actually enact ordinances or laws within their own municipalities that is actually good for the community. So a lot of concern about this. These are some of the preemption bills that have been passed. Some of these are actually companion bills to other bills. Some of these are good and some of these are bad. Some of these are in combating HB1 that was passed, which is the anti-riot bill, is how a lot of people know that. There's one on rent control, over-the-counter drugs. The one about tree trimming, found that interesting, but there's also one about preemption of firearms that I think was a little disconcerting to some folks, about being able to have a firearm in your vehicle without an employer being able to question you about that, or whether or not you had a concealed carry, but also the preemption of recycling and polystyrene materials. Remember, I think County that wanted to put a single-use plastic ban in place about straws. And all of a sudden, the state of Florida had an opinion on that. So they overrode the county's ability to be able to put a measure in place that they thought was beneficial for themselves and for their constituents. So I realize I'm right at my time, but this is a saying that we believe, nobody will ever deprive the American people of the right to vote except the American people themselves. And the only way that we do that is by not voting. So regardless of what gets passed here in the state of Florida or what gets passed in Washington, D.C., we need everybody to continue to register people to vote. And then we need for you to actually turn out and have a voice in your own community and your own nation. So, and said that, I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Lenelle. And that we will have some time for Q&A, but we want to hear from all three of our legislative speakers before we get to that. So I'm moving on to Judy Shecklin.
Good evening. Before I begin, I'd like to mention that we've been meeting with our legislators this week. I spent some time this morning on the phone with Senator Gibson, and as much as I would like to be optimistic about some of the bills that I think would be very, have a very positive impact on the state of Florida, we have a real concern because of, I believe, what's now a supermajority in our legislature of Republicans. And I know, now is also National Organization for Women is also now nonpartisan, but when we're looking at a progressive agenda. So, I'm going to talk about some of our priority areas as a women's rights organization. And again, I didn't get much encouragement from some of our supportive representatives about the impact we can have, but nonetheless, that's what we can do. So we hope, as you learn about these bills tonight, it inspires you to, reach out and comment and, respond to all of the action alerts you're receiving. So in the area of reproductive rights, abortion rights, access to birth control, there are actually some very good bills by our friends. And SB 628, and I'm sure we're not all that interested in the numbers, but the abortion clinic regulation bill basically would allow places that provide family planning to also get funding for it, which has not happened in the past. It also would eliminate the waiting period for abortion. So not only is it clinic regulations, but it also is the whole broad area of delegating that authority to the person who it impacts. And another excellent bill is the reproductive health care bill. This has actually been placed in other states, passed in other states, and there's also a bill similar to this on the federal level. And this would provide abortion care as codified. It would be a right, and all of the specific provisions that impact a woman's reproductive health would then be part of the law. And so, again, that's a very good bill. Neither of these bills have any likelihood of passing, sadly, but certainly, we can still talk about them. There's been a lot of discussion about some of the bills that we oppose. One of them is HB 5. That's a bill that was passed in Texas. Many of you may be familiar with it because it has kind of a vigilante piece to it where it empowers neighbors, citizens to actually have civil penalties against, I'm confusing these bills. That would be HB 167, the 6-week abortion ban. Unfortunately, that one really has very little chance of passing. It doesn't even have a Senate companion, but that's the vigilante bill that, gives civil cause for damages. So that would be someone could sue anybody who's involved in somebody getting an abortion after 6 weeks. So that's a really awful bill. Now, the one that will likely pass, and the governor has made this a priority, and when he makes things a priority, we know they usually do get passed, and he does sign them. And there's already been movement on this bill. It's been through one House committee, and I think there's another one this week. So I'm not even going to read the name because I find it so insulting, but it's a 15-week abortion ban. And, we're very concerned about this bill because it certainly provides limits to, women's access to reproductive health care. But in addition, there's no stipulation for, rape and incest. There also, if you want an exception, 2 physicians have to sign off on that, even if it's a minor, and if there are serious fetal anomalies. So, we're real concerned about this bill, and it probably will become law. In the past, we've had the opportunity to go before the Supreme Court in Florida, and because we have a much more stringent right to privacy than actually even the United States Constitution, these bills have been in the past found unconstitutional. Sadly, our Supreme Court has been stacked by a series of very conservative Republican governors and legislatures. So, we no longer can be assured that we will have those laws overturned. And that's really very disturbing. The closest place then women in Florida could go would be to North Carolina, and that's quite a drive. Once again, impacting those who can least afford it the most. In the area of LGBTQ plus rights, some good bills, reversal of the trans women's sports ban. This was a particularly cruel bill last year that prevented trans girls from participating in sports. We know these are a very marginalized group that, has very high rates of depression and suicide and being bullied. But again, we would limit their access to this positive, affirming activity in school. This bill would reverse that. So this is a really good bill and something we could support. Another bill that is also very positive in the area of LGBT rights is offenses evidencing prejudice. And this would broaden those kinds of prejudicial views, hate crimes, to include gender identity and sexual orientation. So that, again, these are two very good bills with very small chance of passing. A really dangerous bill this year, and it doesn't have a Senate companion, so it probably is not going to go anywhere. And this is House Bill 211, and the filer of this bill, Representative Sabatini, has never been a friend to the LGBTQ community, and this would criminalize doctors. It would have them, actually be convicted of a crime if they have been found to help youth get care who are trans, and even wanting to just, have information about that. So again, this is a very cruel bill. Moving on to the next slide. Thank you. Criminal justice, racial justice. So, and some of these good bills, very happily, we have had our own delegation support. So our Representative Davis, Tracy Davis, is the House sponsor of this bill. And it provides appropriations for an Office of Diversity. And it also establishes, a chief official, as well as the requirement for a strategic plan every year, so that we could address areas of inequality and inequity, specifically dealing, with racial issues. So it's really a good bill, and who knows, there is a miracle that might be able to pass. The bill that is, one of them that is really of concern this year in the area of racial justice is this HB 57, the racial and sexual discrimination. And, as many of us, as we were in our careers, would always get annual training in, sexual harassment, discrimination. Well, this bill will make that illegal. And it's, in education and healthcare and all different arenas, employers would not be able to provide this training. So, it is a real concern. And, that could pass, particularly, with the dog whistle kinds of legislation that we see this year. We have more hopes for some of the bills with violence against women. Many of these have come up every year, and they have not passed. And so, some of them are not passing because they involve firearms limitation, like SB 372, which is, and HB 83. Anna Escamani is the House sponsor. She's a good friend to people who believe in social justice issues, and it prohibits you having a firearm if someone has been convicted of domestic violence. So, and it goes further in, removing them from the home and things of that nature, and we know that, that is the highest rate in domestic violence of ways that women are killed. And it really poses a threat for children in the family as well. And the next bill even goes further, because that would be preventing firearms from being in the home, even if there's a risk protection order, and also if it's a misdemeanor crime, that law enforcement could go into those homes and actually seize the guns while these things are going on, because we know that's the highest risk time once a risk protection order has been initiated. So those, again, are very good bills. Our own Senator Gibson is a sponsor in the Senate of the statute of limitation for sexual offenses. And any of you who have been familiar with, news in the popular, just sort of the tabloids and the newspapers know that many times people are limited from filing suits against sexual offenses because there's been such a long period. And we also know that children are not, often empowered to report these kinds of offenses. So this would remove that statute of limitations. So that's a very important bill. Moving on to something that has actually had momentum, and it's a good bill, which is so wonderful. And it's sad that we have to think about these things, but it's great that this bill is actually getting some positive action. And that's sexual battery on a mentally incapacitated person, which includes someone who is under the influence of drugs or alcohol. In the past, you could not convict someone of rape if they could prove that the victim was actually under the influence. So this would reverse that. And it actually has been through, I think, 2 committees already and has passed. And I think it's slated to go on. So that's positive information where there hasn't been a lot. Some criminal justice reform, again, there are very positive things, but I have very little hope that they will pass. But, again, our voices sometimes are heard. So Senate Bill 1176, I checked today, it still doesn't have a House companion. And this would establish citizen review boards, which means these are citizens who look at, questionable police actions, and they then, discuss them and, get information and can be available to actually make recommendations. We don't have one of these in Jacksonville. They've been around for 40 to 50 years. And, it's been an outcry by many in our community that it would really give the police more credibility if citizens had the ability to look at some of this, to look at some of the decisions and things that have been done. So that's another really good bill. The next bill is SB 888, another very good bill, House Bill 73, and this would reverse stand your ground. And that, of course, as we know, is a way that people can defend themselves if they say, I shot this person because, I was fearful. The recent Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia, there was that kind of defense. So we certainly don't want that type of heinous defense of murder. And typically they're, again, of people of color, we're seeing victimized by these laws. So this would reverse that. So that's another good one. And then finally, another, one of our favorites that we hope would pass, and it is by our own Angie Nixon, one of our representatives in Jacksonville who we love. And that would reverse, it's called criminal justice, and it would reverse HB1, which is the protest ban. Last year, there were so many provisions that restricted any kind of protests and excused people if they ran over a protester with a car. I mean, it was just a horrendous bill, and it's law. So this would reverse that bill. Okay, and moving on to our next slide. This is so important. I really appreciate the beautiful job Carol's done of providing these slides, because this is what I look at every day. And this is the website, myfloridahouse.gov. It's a very easy website to negotiate. And basically, if you go under the bills tab and click on it, you can put in either the name, if you have a favorite issue, or a number if you have a bill number, and see what committees it's been assigned to, whether or not there have been votes on it, what kind of action. And so this is really an excellent website. As I say, I do go on it every day to look at, where some of these bills are. And you can also track a bill. You give them your email and they will send you updates about, where the bill is, so that you can actually, have action. Even if you're not getting action alerts, you can create your own actions. And my favorite group, other than, of course, the groups that are hosting this and my own Jacksonville Now, we also, Jacksonville Now chapter at our Jacksonville Now chapter, our website also has action alerts we're doing, but the UUJusticeFlorida.org is a wonderful group. I see David, who organizes this, is on this call this evening. And you can, by signing up here, you can receive email information that makes it very easy to have any sort of response on a regular basis when these bills are being channeled through committees, which they must do before they are passed into law and passed in both houses and signed by the governor. So I want to thank you all for your interest. And again, if you have questions in the chat, and jacksnow@gmail.com, Jacksnow chapter, if you want to be on our mailing list and get our action alerts as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judy. And before everyone, just hold on. This is all really important information. Remember that we're recording this, so don't be taking notes madly. You can get all of this to look over again. And we will switch now to the healthcare arena. And
were you done, Elizabeth?
yeah, sorry, I was muted the entire time. I was handing it over to you.
I just wanted to make sure you were done. I just wanted to say a quick thank you, first of all, to our first two speakers who did a wonderful job and went through so many things. If you're not agitated, infuriated, angry, worried, then you're not paying attention, I think, is my take home on some of this. I also want to thank Indivisible Mandarin. I think this is our first joint meeting. It went fabulous so far. And that's thanks to Karen and Marian Tischler. Also, Kathy Cantor has been meeting with Judy Shecklin and I. And of course, Carol Brady, who does all the critical tech stuff along with Marian, and which has allowed this to move so seamlessly. It feels like it's easy, but it's really not. So my sincere thanks to each of you for all your help. So very quickly, because I know we're getting tired, and I'm only going to talk about 3 bills, and then I'm going to kind of just talk more generally. So HB 27 with an accompanying Senate bill would expand Medicaid for Floridians with 133% of federal poverty level, which is very, very low income. And that's a bill that needs to be passed, of course. And then we have a joint resolution filed, which amends the Constitution and would have a very similar effect, though not exactly. It's 138% of federal poverty level. The chances of either of those bills getting through, I would say, is 0. So I'm not going to talk too much more about it, other than to say Florida is one of 12 states who have not allowed for Medicaid expansion. It makes no sense financially. But I also had a conversation with actually the chair of the finance committee. And even given the question, if we could solve all the finance, would you support Medicaid expansion? I could not get a full-throated yes out of him. So there is just not the political will right now. And I know that's hard to hear, but I think we have to organize and move on. HB 675 is interesting in that it allows people with disabilities to do a buy-in to Medicaid, although it doesn't describe what the rate would be. There are no details associated with this bill. It's very sort of up in the air. So until we get more details, I think it may be one of those feel good, well, at least we did this kind of a bill, is how it feels to me. I couldn't speak to y'all without bringing up COVID, but there are a lot of bills that cover things like, is it a felony to produce a false vaccine card? Well, LOL, you can't even ask someone their vaccine status. So almost all of those COVID type bills that have been introduced in hopes of trying to help our situation, the governor's special session has basically just made them all moot. Florida's Association for Healthcare basically is going to defy the federal mandate, even for hospitals and healthcare workers. You probably saw recently that the Orange County DOH head, Raul Pino is his name, was put on administrative leave because he encouraged the employees of the DOH to get vaccinated. Next slide, Carol. Thank you. Meanwhile, the real problem now is the healthcare workers, hospitals, and even employers are facing these significant issues thanks to our legislature. This home rule, as Lenelle spoke about, really prevents any local action from happening. There's horrible vigilante style bills which can be directed towards healthcare providers. There's no leadership who is willing to oppose there's no one in the legislature basically willing to oppose leadership. And in the face of COVID for the last 2 years, we've had 20% of healthcare workers leaving. And honestly, I don't blame them. We're to the point where now the National Guard is coming in to help out in many states who are just overwhelmed. But unfortunately, when you look into it, they're not trained healthcare workers. They're doing logistics, they're moving beds, they're putting up tents, but they're not really doing anything significantly helpful for what we need, which is trained healthcare workers. Recently, you may have seen an article about the Mayo who fired 700 workers. And I love how they always put that title, 700 people fired, but there's 73,000 people in their workforce. This was National Mayo. Unfortunately, so it was only 1%, right? But in Florida, I am told they are afraid to go against the governor. They have not fired anyone. So when you go to Mayo, do not be thinking, oh, everyone here has been vaccinated because Mayo let those folks go. If you were in Minnesota or Arizona, possibly, but not here. So you just don't know. Next slide, please. Just a quick COVID update, folks. I hope everyone's been boosted, and we now are going under the assumption that we're pretty much over the hump in the state, although Duval appears to be just cresting. But remember, the hospitalizations are going to lag by a couple of weeks and deaths about 2 to 4 weeks later. But we're not seeing the kind of horrible numbers in the hospital as we did with that third wave. The reason it's such a strain is, again, we've lost 20% of our healthcare force, and a lot of those folks are still getting sick. But sick isn't sick, right? 80 to 90% of the folks who are hospitalized with COVID are unvaccinated. Now, the good news is we have, quote, free tests, although, we're all paying for that somehow. The bad news is, the other good news they came out with last week was the new monoclonal antibody site opening. However, you should know that most monoclonal antibodies are geared towards the spike protein, which Omicron doesn't have. There's one called Sotrovimab that may be effective, but the rest of them don't do a lot for Omicron, unfortunately. I think my last slide. So when I hear folks say, well, it doesn't matter if you're vaccinated because unvaccinated and vaccinated people get COVID. And yeah, that's true. And I play tennis, and so does Serena Williams. So the point being, if you're vaccinated, you're in a much, much better place. So I think that is the end of my slides, Carol. I can't remember if we moved. Yes. And with that, I would like to kick it back to Elizabeth. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to try to answer questions later. Thanks.
Yeah. And actually, Tracy, you're on at this point, I believe. So let's move to you, and then we'll have Q&A for everyone once you've updated us on you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. Hi, everybody. I apologize for not having my video on. I'm literally in the car in the dark, so you wouldn't be able to see me even if my video is on. I'm on my way home from a community meeting up on the north side at the Legends Center, where I was listening to a group of very active folks who are pretty disgusted with not having their voices heard on city council. So now more than ever, I feel like we need to elect a person like me who very much will listen to her constituents. I just want to give you a little update on the campaign and our plan, as we have, I think it's like 32 days until the election, give or take a day. You all know that I was the top vote getter in round one on December 7th, and we have used the results of that election to really target very strategically the rest of our campaign. And so what that means is we have both a volunteer group of folks, many of whom are on this call, that are going out and knocking on doors. And then we also have a paid field team that are focused more on the north and west side of Jacksonville. But we are very strategically reaching out to those the people that voted for me, but also voted for James Jacobs in round one, and trying to get them to come out and vote again for the runoff. In addition, we're sending out mail and we're doing digital advertising that's micro-targeted. We will also be on cable and broadcast next month. And many of you may know that the national sort of grassroots organization of volunteers called Postcards to Voters is voting for our campaign, which is really extraordinary because we're getting pictures of these beautiful postcards that folks are sending out with our message. Right. Thanks, Elizabeth. And they're just lovely. And so it's really fun to see this on social media where people are getting them from folks in New York and California and Massachusetts and, of course, here in Florida. So we're really grateful for that support. I think some of you may know that there are going to be 3 debates. My Republican opponent and me, and that will include 2 televised debates. So one will be, they'll both be taped and then broadcast. One will be moderated by Tanika Hughes with Action News Jax, and that will be taped next Friday, the 28th. And I'm not sure yet what the broadcast date is, but we'll be using social media and our database to reach out to folks and let them know when that will be broadcast. The other debate will be with Kent Justice, and that will be taped, I believe, on the 3rd of February. And again, I'm not quite sure what the broadcast date is, but we'll let everybody know. And then the third debate will be a candidate forum with the Tiger Bay Club, which is scheduled for February 18th. And that will be at the River Club. And if you're interested in attending any of those events, we can get that to you. So I think it's going to be wonderful for folks to be able to see both of us, and I'm excited to debate him. Looking forward to both talking more about my views and what I want to do, but also challenging him to talk about things that I know that he has said, because I'm sure he's going to sort of paint one picture for these debates, but I have video and other documents that show what he's actually saying. So I look forward to debating him. I'm happy to take any questions. I just want to say thank you so much to all of you for the incredible support that you have given to me. It's been really touching and moving. I probably cry maybe once a day when I think about the way that people are showing up for me and donating to our campaign and giving their valuable time to knock on doors. And it's just, I don't know that I can ever really adequately express my gratitude, but I am just so grateful. So thank you again. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'm going to put myself on mute unless you have questions for me.
Thank you, Tracy. And we're very grateful that a candidate with your energy and skills is in this race. I was actually planning to show everyone, this is one of those postcards to voters that came from Seattle to one of our BAM members. And particularly at a moment when we're all feeling so embattled in Florida, it is in fact deeply gratifying to know and to remember that there are groups like ours all over the country, some of them even in blue states, which do exist, who are as frantic as we are about the issues and as willing to pitch in as we are, and they are pitching in. And so I love that they've picked up on Tracy's race. You don't necessarily expect national interest in a city council at-large seat. It really speaks to how active the larger community that we're all part of is, and we should all take hope in that. Thanks to our speakers. I was pushing you all so much to move ahead that I haven't, and since I was on mute moments ago, let me say again, thank you all for all the information you've brought to us. I have a hint. I have some questions that were submitted early. If people have questions for either of the 3 legislative speakers or for Tracy, put them in the chat box. We'll hope to get to some of them. several of these submitted questions all boil down to, I'm going to pin you guys, so I hope that you stay all visible. This is my new skill, which is questionable, but this should make the three of you visible to everyone. And as near as I can tell, any of you who have something to say should feel free to speak up. Half of the questions all boil down to the same thing, which is what can we plausibly do to help? Everyone recognizes we have the legislature that we have. We also have some amazingly strong and articulate and hardworking Democratic reps in there. But what's the best way we can be helpful?
This morning, in speaking with Senator Gibson, she said one of the things that really seems to be most impactful, but is also most challenging, is actually showing up, is actually going to Tallahassee. And if there's a specific bill or issue that you're passionate about, speaking before a committee and being willing to, actually go in and explain, why you're for something. Personal stories have a big impact. So that was her suggestion.
I will contribute this, and this is not necessarily about this session, but it is communicating with your elected representatives throughout the year, not just when it's time to do action alerts, phone calls, emails. They get bombarded, and it's like somebody's trying to keep score with who's weighing in where. But build rapport with your representatives throughout the year. The way that they normally come by knowing what kind of bills they need to file, needs of their community. And when you're not communicating with them, they really don't have an opportunity to hear what the needs of their community is. So I would encourage everyone, whether you get responses to your emails or not, try to make those office visits, Zoom visits, make phone calls, but don't wait till a bill's been introduced and you're either trying to push it hard forward or you're trying to push it back. Is really try to build rapport at the local level throughout the year.
Another question, it's a variation on that someone asked, saying, since our Florida legislature is overwhelmingly Republican, are there creative ways to communicate or to impact this legislature that we have by engaging local businesses, corporations, larger groups of other groups? Any creative ideas that we could take from you there?
Well, I think, go ahead.
I was just going to say something that Mayor Glasser talks about a lot, which is, and this isn't, I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, but we have a lot of IPAs here, or NPAs, I guess they're called in Florida, not IPA. That's alcohol. Sorry. So NPAs, we should try to engage that we maybe are guilty of focusing a little too much on Democrats. And yes, we do need to get Democrats to vote. Absolutely. And I'm hopeful that this pendulum has swung so far that it almost has to start to slow down and swing back. But I think we need to take these awful things that are happening and make sure people understand they need to vote to make something change.
Lenelle, I think this one perhaps starts with you. Anyone else happy to weigh in? This person is saying, these proposals to do things like give the legislature the ability to step into a county and override their election, or some of the really most anti-democratic proposals that we're seeing, at least in other parts of the country. What can be done about how much are we at risk for that here this session? And if so, what can we be doing about it?
Oh, wow. In a lot of ways, it seems like the horse is already out of the barn, so to speak. There are a lot of T-shirts and a lot of bumper stickers that say elections have consequences. And here they are. We're looking at maps that are going to be drawn here that may go into in front of the Florida Supreme Court, which is put in place by whom? And we're seeing this at the national level, where there are things that are going in front of the Supreme Court. And we look at how the Supreme Court kind of leans based on an election that allowed someone to put people on the Supreme Court. So I would tell you, just like Nancy just finished saying, if you have an opportunity, I'm sorry, that Judy said, if you have an opportunity to go to Tallahassee and speak, go and tell your story, humanize what's going on, speak to your legislators. But this is now not the league, this is me as a constituent now. I feel like somebody may have given us bad guidance when they said don't talk about politics and religion, because someone's religion right now is putting my healthcare as an LGBTQ member at risk. Someone is putting LGBTQ kids in harm's way to be bullied and to be ostracized in certain situations in their school environment or in their after-school extracurricular activities. There are people who are making decisions based on religion, and they're bringing it into our government. And it's having an adverse impact on a lot of us. And again, that's not necessarily the league, that's me as a constituent. But we really do have to start talking to each other, because what we call politics are the very things that impact our lives day to day, whether or not we have affordable housing. Right now we're struggling with that. And I know that's not what this is about this evening, but we have people in the service industry who have been horribly impacted by COVID, been impacted as to whether or not they can go to school. And if you're in the service industry and you're not making a lot of money, you can't necessarily afford childcare or to not be at work. But all of this is being impacted by people who are elected. So we really have to start talking about these issues that impact our lives. We must start telling stories as our Native Americans did back in the day. We must tell our stories. And that is how we will get to know each other, and we will understand each other's struggle. And then hopefully we will, really impart knowledge on people to elect folks who represent the needs of our community and the people who work in these communities.
And I do think that when we make our voices heard, we do have an impact. And, when we feel strongly, getting in touch with like-minded groups as we're doing this evening. In 20 years, there was only one anti-LGBTQ bill passed, and that was last year with the trans sports ban. It was a very organized group. There were lots of different supporters, as the people on this call. Even in the reproductive rights area in this very conservative legislature, we've been able to limit some of the pain. So I do think, despite the very just sort of overwhelming feeling of being so outnumbered in Tallahassee, that when we do make our voices heard through emails, calls, letters, it does have an impact, and it's what we can do. So I think it's really important to continue doing that, and also to remind the members of our organizations and beyond that the way we're going to change this is by voting, by registering voters, voting ourselves, educating voters, so that we end up with people representing us who share our values.
Talking about you, Tracy.
Yeah, I would.
Go ahead.
I just want to. I want to speak to the importance of voting. But every time I hear some of the women on this call, I just want them to run for office, Lenelle. And so I think it's really important that we vote, yes, but we've got to challenge every seat. And I know it's really difficult with the gerrymandering, but I think that we saw the benefit of that in 2020 when we really fielded a lot of candidates up and down the ballot. And so we definitely have some holes for our slate, looking at the municipal elections in 2023 and even the local, some of our state house seats for 2022. So I just want to throw that out there that I think you all know that I have a lot of energy around, not just running myself, but really getting behind really strong ethical women to run for office. So I hope some of you on this call will consider doing that.
I like that idea. I'm too old, but other people should jump right in. Again, I hate, a lot of people are very concerned about the redistricting, only in the spirit of making things even worse. And the governor's entry, and again, Lenelle, don't want to pull you too far out of, you can speak to this either as the league or as yourself, but as a trained observer, it's at least plausible that the governor could veto the maps presented to him by the legislature and insist on his own. As near as anyone can currently decode the law, he could do that, but surely that makes it more vulnerable to legal challenge. And so do you have any knowledge you can share about what could come next?
I am not a lawyer, but sitting in on a meeting this afternoon with a lawyer, they said this is, they think it's unprecedented to actually see this occur for the person who has veto introduces on a map that also doesn't seem to abide by the law.
Right.
So, it's Florida. So we still hope that the law matters and that the law stands. So we will see. But again, I really do encourage everyone to be on the record about these maps, whether it's here in Jacksonville. We're still in the map drawing, or not the map drawing, but we're getting ready to go into public comments and presentations starting on the 27th. We hope that you will either participate in that in person or virtually if you're able to do that. But we do need people to be on record. And if you want to, try your hand at map drawing and submit a map, there's an opportunity to do that. But we really do need for you to stop and look at how these lines are being drawn. What is the impact? Does it measure up to the fair districts or to the Florida statutes? And if not, be on record. Like I said, there's an opportunity on the Florida districting site to actually do a submission on different maps. So we would encourage you to take a look at those and then make comments. You may not know what's going on in other parts of the state, but at least look at how the maps are impacting you. And if anybody looked at the one that the governor that submitted, I mean, that was just pretty blatant, that it was just really marginalized an entire group of voters.
Yep.
And this is a little bit of an encouraging kernel. When we asked Angie Nixon about that, she thought this was largely one of those worst case scenarios, smoke and mirrors, a lot of distraction so that they can just push through the others. And we're all saying, well, shoo, at least we didn't have that. But who knows? Who knows? But that was her interpretation.
Okay. I have one question here. I don't know the details well enough, so if there are more questions, we'll ask the questioner, but I think this is more for you, Nancy. Embedded in House Bill 5 is the Infant Mortality Review Committee work of the Healthy Start Coalition and youth prevention programs. How are these organizations responding to this bill? Or are they?
So I may need to phone a friend, Carol. I'm actually not familiar with HB 5. But can you describe maybe, Joy, what that is?
What HB 5 is, what the legislation is? It's called an act relating to fetal and infant mortality. And basically that's the 15-week abortion ban, similar to Mississippi's ban. Yeah.
So Joy's question is so that's kind of, maybe you might be able to respond. How are the Infant Mortality Review Committee of Healthy Start and youth prevention programs responding to this? In other words, are they pushing, as your question, Joy, are they pushing back on the wording and the content? The organizations themselves?
Looking for Joy. Sorry.
Yes, that's my question. Well, I don't read bills, but for some reason I couldn't sleep one night, so I got up and decided to read this bill. And I initially thought I was reading the wrong bill because I saw a lot of work that Healthy Start does with their Infant Mortality Review Committee, where they look at why babies die before their first year, what are some of the social cultural factors. Then I saw some stuff related to youth programs, and then I started seeing the abortion stuff. So I just was amazed by the fact that this was embedded in what I thought was good work that has been going on in the state for years, particularly the infant mortality stuff from Healthy Start, unless I misread it. So I just wanted to get some clarification and find out what is Healthy Start, how are they responding to it?
Yeah.
I have to confess, I can't answer other than they're trying to hide stuff by putting that in there, but it looks like Marion has her hand up.
Yes, there was an article written in the digital Times Union today. I believe I saw it because it was in print, and it was talking about, or maybe I ran into one of the committees that was reviewing this bill, that there were like 100 people that wanted to do public comments, and they were restricted to a 75-minute period of total comments. And so everybody had just moments to say what they needed to say. But when they had debate among the committee members, I think it was Gall, G-A-L-L, who was favoring this bill, or maybe sponsoring the bill, was challenged about how they came to believe that 15 weeks was the appropriate length of time. You know, why reduce it from the current 24 weeks to 15? And you know, so I suggest you read the article so you understand kind of where the debate is at this point. I don't want to go any further. I know there's a lot more detail to go on, but there has been discussion, and I think the article in the Times Union was insightful.
Okay, we've got one more redistricting related question, which is, would a local office holder, a current local office holder, be impacted in the future by the new districting? Like, would they lose their job? How does that work?
But my understanding is, like, here at the local level, they don't fall under fair districts. If you've listened to any of the statements, you hear at least 3 incumbents who are concerned with drawing lines that protects them in their district, but not at the state level. And I just put the statement in there. That's from the fair districts. Legislative districts or districting plans may not be drawn to favor or disfavor an incumbent or political party. If that answered the question or not.
No. Well, Donna, speak up if I'm not getting it right. I was reading this more like if somebody's a current office holder and his or her
Right here,
changed.
because there was a story that I didn't have time to read that some Politico here in Jacksonville had commented that, or somebody else had commented about his position, that he would be wiped out. He would be gone.
Oh, Al Lawson, for instance.
Okay, is that true?
Well, his whole district would be gone. I mean, District 5, if you saw it, it was gone. That was the example that I gave on the map, was the current District 5 where it exists, and then it doesn't exist. So they've kind of split that district up. So yes, he would be out of.
Does that have any repercussions in terms of it being unfair?
Well, it's less about Al Lawson, and it's more about the voters in that entire district being divvied up. So it dilutes their voting power.
I understand, but I'm trying to figure out whether it's the district is being gerrymandered.
A good portion of the state on that map was gerrymandered. Yes. In my opinion. I'm not a lawyer, thank goodness, but
okay.
But yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Unless there's any, I really appreciate the time and energy all four of you have put into being with us tonight. And thank you very much. Thank you for your continued efforts to be making a difference as well as to educate us. And we will move on with many thanks to a handful of closing slides. Carol? Yeah. The last thing, since redistricting is on all our minds, here in Jacksonville, there's a group, a large group, and actually Joy Burgess, who was speaking just a few minutes ago, has been a key leader in that effort. BAM's involved, DWIN's involved, a host of Democratic caucus groups, and the Young Dems, Jacksonville Young Dems, we've collaborated in trying to educate ourselves so that we can create a citizen tool for all of us to show up at these hearings now that there are going to be hearings. Unlike in Tallahassee, the city charter here requires that hearings be held to inform the public about, or to answer questions, or to, the process has not been all that user-friendly to the public, but here at the back end, there are these meetings scheduled to engage the public. The four at the bottom are formally held by the Rules Committee, which the city charter requires them to do. The one at the top is a council meeting next week, which Brenda Priestley Jackson, who is the Rules Committee chair, has also announced will focus on redistricting and will engage the public if people want to come. So what I am searching for, Joy, say a bit more about that while I try to find my link that I'm putting up so everyone knows how to find this document, which we've now created. What we've done is create a citizen's guide that we hope everybody on this call and your groups that you're associated with and your smart people that you also know, you will send to them, because what we need to do in this case is show up at these meetings, and we have an opportunity to do exactly that and ask questions. Priestley Jackson has committed to the idea that at each meeting, it will be largely, they'll show the maps, they'll talk us through a bit about how they were determined, and then it's mostly about taking public comment and questions. And if they can't be answered in that meeting, they will roll them over and answer them at the next meeting. So in theory, we can get answers to some of the concerns that you'll find in the document I just put out there. And Joy, anything more?
Let me just say,
Yeah.
I was just on a call before this one, where they were looking at state stuff and people were responding. So the same thing is going on at the state as going on locally. The citizens of Duval County have been left out of the process. And this group of organizations, we were like very concerned about that. So we've created this document based on our research of questions that people may want to ask, of concerns certainly that we had that others may have. But most importantly, we've made some recommendations that we may want to look at, such as in the future, independent redistricting commission. Somebody made that at the meeting I was at before this for the state. You know, looking at those factors to engage citizens more. And we all believe that democracy doesn't work if citizens are not part of the conversation. So we're hoping you guys will use the document, because they need to see us come out in force, they meaning city council, at these redistricting meetings, and speak loudly. Use our document to help you find your own words if it's helpful, or have your own words. We put it where it's user-friendly, and hopefully it will be helpful.
Great. So there's that. And then moving on to our, well, we have 2 slides left, I believe. This is Dr. Nancy Stotts would like to come back for a little cameo.
Sorry, my shameless plug. First of all, donate to Tracy. And once you're done donating to Tracy, because that is very time sensitive. Guys, we have 32 days for this election. She needs it now. She needs it yesterday. If you haven't, donate. If you have, donate again, please. Unless you're running yourself for something, you need to support others who are doing the heavy lift and running. And that includes Tracy. But a friend and colleague, Elizabeth Anderson, who really did a phenomenal job during the whole COVID, is running for school board in November of this year. her opponent, who I'm not even going to name, but was introduced on the Steve Bannon show. She is a Moms for Liberty mom. If you're not familiar with that, look it up and you will be, you know, again, angry and mortified. But this person has bankrolled $20,000 because of Steve Bannon. So this should not be a partisan race. This is truly a nonpartisan race. So I'm hoping the league can get involved. I'm hoping all of us can find like-minded folks who just want someone who's level-headed, wants to follow science, wants to do what's right for the kids. She is such a lovely, lovely person and did such a great job as school board president during a very, very difficult time. So please consider donating. I am having a fundraiser. If you're interested in attending or getting more information on that, I'd be happy to share that with you. But please, please consider helping Elizabeth out. Thank you.
And this has been stimulating and wonderful to have you all here. This is the next time we're getting together as a double group, February 24th. Rebecca Jones, who you may or may not remember, was the statistician that got crosswise with the governor early on for trying to report COVID stats correctly. She's now running against Matt Gaetz. So that's a race that we want to know a little more about, though it's not right here. And then Kim Glaskell, who has been data expert to everyone in Duval for quite some time, will be doing a quick look at how the vote laid out in what we hope is Tracy's victory. So come join us for that. And thanks again to everyone for being here and for our speakers. Unless there are any other questions, we are moving on. Thank you all for being here.